The house is finally ours." Those 6 words shattered everything I believed about family. I stood frozen just outside my own kitchen, clutching a tray of freshly baked cinnamon rolls as my son Gabriel wrapped an arm around his wife Vanessa. They smiled at each other while staring across the living room that my late husband, Miguel, and I had built with our own hands over 40 years ago. Then, before I could even breathe, a sleek black sedan rolled slowly into the driveway. Gabriel's smile vanished. Vanessa dropped her champagne glass. And for the first time that day, I realized someone else's arrival had terrified them far more than my presence ever could. If you've ever wondered how far greed can push someone you love, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were standing where I was? Share your opinion in the comments below. And if you enjoy emotional family stories filled with suspense, powerful twists, and heartfelt endings, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the rest of Scarlett's journey. My name is Scarlett Gomez, and at 69 years old, I thought I understood the meaning of loss. I thought losing my husband would be the greatest pain I would ever endure. I was wrong. Sometimes the deepest wounds aren't left by death. They're left by the people who are still alive. My husband Miguel and I met when we were both barely 22. He was a young real estate attorney with more determination than money, and I was working as a receptionist at a small dental clinic in Asheville, North Carolina. We didn't have much, but we shared something that made every struggle worthwhile. We believed in building a life together, one honest day at a time. When we married, we rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment with stained carpets and windows that rattled every winter whenever the mountain winds swept through town. Miguel used to laugh whenever I apologized for our little apartment. "Don't fall in love with walls," he'd tell me while wrapping his arms around me. "Fall in love with the people inside them." I did. Over the years, he worked long hours building his legal practice, while I eventually became the office manager at a pediatric clinic. Every paycheck mattered. We skipped expensive vacations, drove old cars until they simply refused to start, and learned to celebrate life's smallest victories. Our biggest dream wasn't wealth. It was having a home that truly belonged to our family. After nearly 12 years of saving, sacrificing, and working weekends, we finally bought an aging 2-story house on a quiet street lined with oak trees. The paint was peeling, the roof leaked whenever it rained, the hardwood floors creaked beneath every step. Most people saw an old house. Miguel saw our future. Every Saturday morning, we'd wake before sunrise, drink coffee from mismatched mugs, and spend the entire day repairing something together. We replaced windows ourselves, painted every room, sanded the floors, built the backyard deck one plank at a time. Our son Gabriel grew up running through those hallways with scraped knees and endless laughter. Every pencil mark on the laundry room wall recorded his height. Every Christmas ornament hanging in the attic carried another memory. When Gabriel graduated from high school, we celebrated in the backyard beneath strings of white lights. Miguel insisted on hanging himself every December. "This house isn't just wood and bricks," he'd say proudly. "It's our family's story." Years later, Gabriel married Vanessa. At first, I adored her. She was intelligent, confident, beautifully dressed, and always knew exactly what to say. She worked as a successful real estate agent while Gabriel started his own construction company. They seemed like the perfect match. When little Sophia was born, Miguel cried harder than I did. He carried that tiny girl around the house for hours, whispering promises about teaching her to fish, helping with homework, and spoiling her with ice cream before dinner whenever her parents weren't looking. Sophia inherited Miguel's gentle heart. Even as a little girl, she'd sit beside him on the porch swing, asking endless questions about birds, flowers, and why sunsets look different every evening. "You notice things other people miss," Miguel once told her. "Never lose that gift." She smiled exactly the way he did, warm, kind, completely genuine. Life wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. Until the day everything changed. Miguel suffered a massive heart attack one rainy October afternoon. One moment he was trimming roses in our front yard. The next he was lying in an ambulance while I held his hand and begged him not to leave me. He fought for 3 days, then he was gone. The silence after his funeral felt unbearable. For 43 years, every morning had begun with his voice asking how I wanted my coffee. Suddenly, there was only the humming refrigerator and an empty chair across the kitchen table. For months, I caught myself reaching for my phone whenever something funny happened, forgetting there was no one left to call. Grief has strange habits. It hides in ordinary moments, a favorite song, a forgotten sweater, an untouched coffee mug. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night, convinced I heard Miguel unlocking the front door after work. Then reality would return, cold, quiet, final. Almost 2 years passed before I began finding a fragile rhythm again. I volunteered twice a week at the local food pantry. Linda Brooks, my next-door neighbor of over 20 years, often stopped by with homemade soup or fresh tomatoes from her garden. She never pushed me to move on. She simply reminded me that loneliness didn't have to be permanent. Then one evening, Gabriel called. His voice sounded exhausted. "Mom, I need to ask you something." I immediately knew something was wrong. His construction business had struggled for months because rising material costs had forced several major clients to cancel projects. Loans piled up. Equipment payments became impossible. Then came another blow. Vanessa lost her position at the real estate agency after the housing market slowed dramatically. Within weeks, they were drowning in debt. "We're trying to sell the house," Gabriel explained quietly, "but it may take time." I listened without interrupting. "I hate asking this," he continued. "Would it be all right if we stayed with you for a little while just until we get back on our feet?" He sounded embarrassed, ashamed, like the little boy who used to apologize after accidentally breaking a window with his baseball. "There isn't anywhere else we can go." I didn't hesitate. "Gabriel," I said softly, "this has always been your home." There was a long silence. Then I heard him crying. "Thank you, Mom." Within 3 weeks, they moved in. The first few months felt almost magical. The house came alive again. Sophia laughed while baking cookies with me every Sunday afternoon. Gabriel repaired loose cabinet doors without being asked. Vanessa cooked elaborate family dinners and insisted I rest while she cleaned afterward. For the first time since Miguel passed away, the dining room echoed with conversation instead of silence. One evening, as we all sat watching the sunset from the back porch, I quietly thanked Miguel in my heart. Maybe this was exactly what he would have wanted. 3 generations under one roof, a family healing together. I truly believed the hardest years were finally behind us. Looking back now, I realized the warning signs had already begun. They were simply hidden behind smiles. Smiles I desperately wanted to believe were genuine, because sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive wearing anger. Sometimes it moves into your home carrying suitcases, family photographs, and promises that everything will only be temporary. Looking back, I often ask myself the same painful question. Exactly when did my home stop feeling like mine? There wasn't one dramatic moment. No shouting, no slammed doors, no obvious act of cruelty. Instead, it happened quietly. One small decision at a time, one excuse after another, one compromise after the next. At first, I actually appreciated Gabriel's eagerness to help. "Mom," he said one morning while paying the electric bill online, "you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Let me handle some of this now." His words warmed my heart. I remembered the little boy who used to insist on carrying grocery bags that were far too heavy for him. "You've earned a break," he smiled. I believed him. Soon he was paying the water bill, then the internet, then the property taxes. Whenever I offered to write him a check, he waved me away. "We're family." Those 2 words always made me feel safe. Family. How strange that the very word I trusted most would eventually become the one that hurt me the deepest. Vanessa, meanwhile, threw herself into what she called freshening up the house. At first, I welcomed her enthusiasm. She rearranged the kitchen cabinets so everything was easier to reach. She bought new curtains for the living room. She replaced faded throw pillows with elegant navy blue ones. "It's only cosmetic," she said cheerfully. "I hope you don't mind." Of course I didn't. The house had grown old alongside Miguel and me. A little change didn't seem like a bad thing, but little changes became larger ones. One afternoon, I came downstairs carrying a basket of laundry. I froze. The large framed wedding photograph of Miguel and me, the one that had hung above the fireplace for over 40 years, was gone. In its place hung an abstract painting with bold black and gold lines. For several seconds, I simply stared, unable to process what I was seeing. Vanessa walked in carrying fresh flowers. "Oh," she said casually, "doesn't this room feel so much more modern?" I forced a smile. "What happened to the picture?" She looked genuinely surprised that I had asked. I put it away safely. Away. It didn't really match the room anymore. The room, not your room, not Miguel's room, not our living room, just the room. She smiled as though she had done me a favor. I wrapped it carefully. Nothing happened to it. I nodded. "Thank you." Those 2 words tasted bitter. That evening, after everyone went upstairs, I quietly searched the house. Eventually, I found our wedding photograph leaning against several dusty boxes in the attic. It wasn't broken, but somehow, seeing 43 years of marriage hidden behind old Christmas decorations hurt more than I could explain. I carried the picture downstairs. Before I could hang it back up, Gabriel stopped me. "Mom." His voice was unusually hesitant. "Vanessa worked really hard decorating." "I know." Maybe we could leave things the way they are." I looked at him. "Your father's picture doesn't belong in the attic." He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's just decorating." "No," I answered quietly. "It isn't." For a brief second, irritation flashed across his face. Then it disappeared. "Let's not argue." I didn't. Instead, I carried the photograph into my bedroom and placed it on my dresser. That was the first time Miguel's face disappeared from the main floor of the home we had built together. It wouldn't be the last. Over the following weeks, more things quietly vanished. Miguel's favorite leather recliner, his old record player, the handcrafted bookshelf he'd built during one rainy winter. Boxes began appearing in the attic faster than I could keep track. Whenever I asked where something had gone, Vanessa always had the same answer. "We're simply creating more space." Creating space, for whom I didn't ask, perhaps because I already knew the answer. One Saturday afternoon, Linda Brooks came over carrying blueberry muffins fresh from her oven. She looked around the living room. "Everything looks different." I smiled weakly. "Vanessa enjoys decorating." Linda nodded politely before lowering her voice. "Scarlett, are you all right?" "I'm fine." She studied my face. "You don't sound convinced." I almost told her everything. Almost. Instead, I laughed softly. "I suppose I'm just getting used to having a full house again." Linda reached over and squeezed my hand. "If you ever need to talk, I know." After she left, I stood by the front window watching her walk back home. Something inside me wanted to run after her, to admit that I felt like a stranger inside my own house, but I couldn't. Because if I said those words aloud, they would become real. Sophia noticed everything. Unlike the adults, she rarely spoke without thinking. One evening, she found me watering flowers in the backyard. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart." She hesitated, then looked toward the house. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. "I think so." She frowned slightly. "You don't smile as much anymore." Children often see truths adults work hard to hide. I brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm just getting older. I don't think that's it." She looked like she wanted to continue. Then the back door slid open. "There you are," Vanessa called. "Dinner's ready." Sophia immediately fell silent. She glanced at me, then at her mother, then back again. Whatever she had wanted to say, she swallowed it. At dinner, I noticed something else. Gabriel and Vanessa kept exchanging glances whenever finances came up. Whenever I mentioned paying for groceries, Gabriel quickly interrupted. "I've got it." When I asked about renewing my homeowner's insurance, he answered before I finished speaking. "I already handled that." Handled. Everything seemed to be handled, without me, without asking me, without including me. One afternoon, I went looking for my file cabinet. Inside were decades of records. Property taxes, insurance policies, mortgage documents from years ago. Miguel believed every important paper should stay organized. The cabinet was locked. That had never happened before. I searched my keyring. Nothing fit. Gabriel happened to walk by. "Oh," he said casually. "I changed the lock." "You did?" "Just for security." "I wasn't aware," he smiled. "I forgot to mention it." Forgot. Another tiny word. Another tiny cut. I began noticing other things. Conversations suddenly stopping when I entered a room. Vanessa lowering her voice during phone calls. Gabriel closing his laptop whenever I walked past. Nothing concrete. Nothing I could point to. Only a growing feeling that life inside my own home continued, without me. Then came the afternoon that is replayed in my mind 1,000 times. I was walking upstairs when I heard Sophia's voice inside her bedroom. She sounded upset. "No, Dad? That's wrong." I stopped. Gabriel answered in a sharp whisper. "You don't understand." "I understand enough." "You are not discussing this with Grandma. I don't want her to get hurt." There was a long silence. Then Gabriel spoke again. His voice was colder than I had ever heard before. "Stay out of grown-up business." I stood frozen outside the door. My heart beat faster. A few seconds later, the bedroom door opened. Sophia stepped into the hallway. Her eyes immediately met mine. They were filled with guilt and fear. She opened her mouth as though she wanted to tell me something important, something urgent. But before a single word could leave her lips, Vanessa appeared from the other end of the hallway with a bright smile that felt strangely forced. "There you both are," she said. "Scarlett, I was just looking for you." Sophia lowered her head. The moment was gone. But deep inside me, a quiet voice whispered something I had been refusing to believe. This wasn't just a family struggling to rebuild. Something was happening inside my home, and everyone seemed to know what it was. Everyone except me. The following Monday began like any other. I woke before sunrise just as I had for decades. Old habits have a way of surviving even when the people you shared them with are gone. I brewed a pot of coffee, poured 2 cups without thinking, then quietly emptied the second one into the sink. Even after 2 years, part of me still expected Miguel to walk into the kitchen wearing his faded navy robe, smiling as if nothing in the world could ever separate us. Instead, Gabriel walked in, already dressed in jeans and a button-down shirt. "Morning, Mom." "Good morning." He kissed my forehead, poured himself coffee, and seemed unusually cheerful. "I've got a favor to ask." I smiled. "You've been saying that since you were 6 years old." He laughed. "I promise this one's easy." He reached into a leather folder and placed several papers on the kitchen table. "I've been reviewing your homeowner's insurance and property tax records." I frowned. "I thought those had already been taken care of." "They have, mostly." He slid the documents toward me. The county updated a few filing requirements, nothing serious. I glanced at the first page. The print was dense. Legal language always reminded me of Miguel. He used to joke that lawyers were paid by the word. What exactly is this? Just authorization forms. So the insurance company can communicate with me through one contact instead of mailing everything separately. I looked up. "You've become quite the expert." He smiled modestly. "I've learned a lot over the last few months." Before I could read further, Vanessa entered the kitchen carrying a basket of clean towels. "Oh, good," she said brightly. "I was hoping you'd catch Scarlett before breakfast." She looked at me with practiced warmth. "This paperwork is honestly boring. Gabriel already explained everything." I lowered my eyes back to the pages. "I'd still like to read them." "Of course." Her answer came quickly, almost too quickly. "No rush." Yet both of them remained standing beside the table, watching me, waiting. I read the first page, insurance authorization. That seemed reasonable. The second page discussed tax correspondence. Again, nothing alarming. Then came several pages filled with references to legal descriptions of the property, parcel numbers, county filings, recording information. "I don't understand these." Gabriel leaned over my shoulder. "They're standard attachments." "I don't remember seeing things like this before." "They updated the format." He answered so naturally that I felt embarrassed for questioning him. Perhaps I was becoming overly suspicious. After all, technology regulations and paperwork changed constantly. Miguel had always handled these matters. Without him, everything seemed unnecessarily complicated. I suppose I'll trust your judgment. His smile widened. You always have. Those words should have comforted me. Instead, something about them settled uneasily inside my chest. Still, he was my son. I picked up the pen. One signature, then another. Then initials on 3 different pages. Gabriel carefully organized every document before placing them back inside his folder. Thanks, Mom. He sounded relieved. One less thing to worry about. I nodded. I'm glad I could help. That afternoon, I tried to forget about it. I spent hours planting fresh lavender along the front walkway. Gardening had become my therapy after Miguel died. Plants never lied. Flowers never pretended. If they were healthy, they bloomed. If something was wrong, they showed you. People were rarely that honest. Several days passed peacefully, at least on the surface. Then on Friday morning, I decided to look for Miguel's military discharge papers. A local veterans organization was organizing an appreciation ceremony, and they needed copies of his service records. The documents had always been stored inside the file cabinet in Miguel's study. When I reached the room, I immediately noticed something strange. The desk drawers were open, not wide, just enough for me to realize someone had recently searched through them. I frowned. Perhaps Gabriel had been looking for tax records. Still, the room felt different. Less organized. Less Miguel. I unlocked the file cabinet with the spare key I kept hidden in my jewelry box. Inside, several folders were missing. At first, I thought I had simply overlooked them. I searched every drawer twice, then 3 times. The dark blue folder labeled Property Records was gone. So was the folder containing our original mortgage paperwork. The insurance binder had disappeared as well. My heartbeat quickened. No, I whispered. I checked the shelves, the closet, even the attic. Nothing. By the time Gabriel came home that evening, I was waiting in the kitchen. Gabriel. He looked surprised. Everything okay? I can't find several important files. What kind of files? Your father's property records. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the refrigerator and poured himself iced tea. I probably moved them. You moved them. I've been organizing paperwork. Without telling me. I didn't think it mattered. It matters because I need them. He shrugged casually. I'll look later. His indifference unsettled me more than the missing files themselves. Miguel had treated every legal document like treasure. Gabriel acted as though they were old grocery receipts. That night, I barely slept. Every possibility raced through my mind. Had someone stolen them? Had Gabriel accidentally thrown them away? Or had he removed them intentionally? I hated myself for even thinking such a thing. The next morning, Linda Brooks appeared at my front door carrying a basket of peaches from the farmer's market. You've got to help me eat these before they spoil, she laughed. I welcomed the distraction. We sat together on the porch sipping iced tea while cicadas buzzed lazily in the trees. She glanced toward the driveway. Busy house these days. It certainly is, she smiled. I almost didn't recognize it yesterday. What do you mean? I saw a county vehicle parked outside. I stared at her. A county vehicle. She nodded. White SUV. I assumed someone was inspecting the property before closing. I felt the blood drain from my face. Closing. Linda blinked. Didn't Gabriel tell you? Tell me what? She suddenly looked uncomfortable. Oh, what did he say? I shouldn't have assumed. Linda. She hesitated before speaking carefully. I ran into Carl Jenkins from the county recorder's office yesterday. Carl had known Miguel for years. He congratulated me. For what? She looked genuinely confused. He said your house had finally been transferred and hoped the next owners would keep it as beautiful as you've always kept it. For several seconds, I couldn't hear anything. The birds, the wind, even Linda's voice seemed to disappear. Transferred. Next owners. I forced myself to breathe. There must be some mistake. I'm sure there is. But Linda no longer sounded certain. After she left, I walked back inside on trembling legs. Every room suddenly looked unfamiliar. The framed photographs, the polished staircase, Miguel's old clock ticking in the hallway. How could anyone believe this house had changed owners? I went straight to Gabriel. He was sitting at the dining table working on his laptop. Without looking up, he asked, "Everything all right?" I stood there holding onto the back of a chair because my knees felt weak. "Gabriel!" He finally looked at me. "Did you tell anyone this house was sold?" His expression changed so quickly that had I blinked, I might have missed it. Just a fraction of a second. Surprise. Then calculation. Then the warm smile returned. "Who told you something like that? Answer me." He closed the laptop slowly. "I think," he said in a calm voice, "we've had a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding." I repeated the words slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. Gabriel stood from his chair and walked toward me with the same reassuring smile he had worn since he was a little boy, trying to convince me he hadn't been the one who broke a lamp or tracked mud across the kitchen floor. "Mom, sit down." "I'd rather stand," he sighed. "Linda probably misunderstood something Carl said." "Did she?" "County offices process hundreds of documents every week." "Gabriel." I looked directly into his eyes. "Has anything been filed involving this house?" For the first time, he didn't answer immediately. Only a heartbeat, maybe two. Then he nodded. There were some paperwork updates. "What kind of updates?" "Administrative." "What does that mean?" It means exactly what I said. His answers were becoming shorter, sharper, as if my questions annoyed him. "I don't like not knowing what's happening with my own property." His smile disappeared. "Mom, why are you making this into something it's not?" "I'm asking because someone congratulated Linda on my house being transferred." "People gossip." "I'd still like an explanation." Vanessa walked into the dining room before Gabriel could answer. She immediately sensed the tension. "Everything okay?" Gabriel forced a laugh. "Mom thinks we've secretly sold the house." Vanessa laughed too, not loudly, just enough to make me feel foolish. "Oh, Scarlett," she said gently, "that's impossible." "Then why would someone from the county say otherwise? I'm sure that they confused our address with another file." She reached for my hand. "I promise you there's nothing to worry about." Normally, that would have been enough. But something inside me had changed. Perhaps it was Linda's worried expression. Perhaps it was the missing documents. Or perhaps it was simply the realization that I could no longer tell when my own son was being honest with me. That afternoon, I drove to downtown Asheville for the first time in months. I told Gabriel I wanted to browse a bookstore. Instead, I parked outside the small brick building where Miguel's law office had once been. The brass sign bearing his name had been removed after his retirement years earlier. Now another attorney occupied the space. As I stood on the sidewalk, memories flooded back. Miguel walking through those doors carrying a worn leather briefcase. Clients greeting him with respect. Late nights when I brought him dinner because he refused to leave until every case was finished. He always believed the law existed to protect ordinary people, especially families. I wondered what he would think if he knew I no longer understood what had been signed in my own kitchen. The receptionist smiled politely when I entered. "May I help you?" "My husband practiced law here for many years." She looked at the name I wrote on the visitor card. "Gomez." "Yes." Her face brightened. "You must be Mrs. Gomez." I nodded. "Our senior attorney speaks very highly of your husband." A few minutes later, Andrew Collins walked into the reception area. He appeared to be in his mid-50s, with silver beginning to appear around his temples. When he shook my hand, his expression softened. "I remember Miguel." "You knew him?" "We worked together for almost 12 years. His voice carried genuine respect. "He taught me more about ethics than any law school ever could." I felt tears forming unexpectedly. "Would you have a few minutes?" "Of course." Inside his office, I explained everything. Gabriel's financial troubles, the paperwork, the missing files, Linda's conversation with the county employee. Andrew never interrupted. He simply listened. When I finished, he leaned back thoughtfully. "Mrs. Gomez, please call me Scarlett." "Scarlett." He folded his hands together. "Do you have copies of the documents you signed?" "I don't." "Did anyone offer them to you?" I searched my memory. "No." He frowned slightly. "They should have." "I trusted my son." "I understand." He was silent for a moment. "I don't want to alarm you prematurely. But I think we need facts. What kind of facts? I'd like to obtain certified copies of every document recently recorded involving your property. Can you do that? Yes. How long will it take? If anything has been filed, he glanced toward his computer, we'll know within a day or two. Hope flickered inside me, not because I expected good news, but because uncertainty is often more frightening than the truth. Before I left, Andrew asked one final question. Scarlett? Yes. Has your son pressured you to sign anything else? I hesitated. No. Has he asked about your will? No. Your bank accounts? No. Andrew nodded slowly. Good. Why? I simply want to understand the full picture. As I reached the door, he added quietly, until we know exactly what's happening. He paused. Don't tell anyone you've come to see me. I turned around. Not even Gabriel. Especially not Gabriel. The drive home felt longer than usual. For the first time in my life, I was keeping a secret from my own child. The thought made me sick. 2 days later, Andrew called. Can you come in this afternoon? His tone was calm. Too calm. I arrived 20 minutes early. Several folders lay open across his conference table. Certified copies, county records, highlighted paragraphs. He waited until I sat down. Scarlett, my hands trembled before he even spoke. I've reviewed every document filed over the past 6 months, and the paperwork you signed wasn't entirely false. A tiny wave of relief washed over me. Then he continued. Some pages genuinely involved insurance updates. I nodded. I knew it. But there it was again. That terrible word. But he slid another document across the table. The insurance paperwork appears to have been attached to additional documents. I stared at the legal language. I don't understand. Andrew pointed to several signature lines. These pages contain your authentic signature. Yes, but based on the formatting, page numbering, and recording sequence. He looked directly at me. I believe these pages were combined with different documents after you signed them. I felt my stomach tighten. Is that possible? It shouldn't be. But it can happen. He opened another folder. The notarization dates don't match, he pointed again. This page references an attachment that doesn't exist. Another page. The page numbers restart halfway through. Another. This signature placement differs from every other page you signed. My heartbeat echoed inside my ears. What does that mean? Andrew took a slow breath. It means someone may have used legitimate signatures to support documents you never knowingly approved, I could barely whisper. So, he finished the sentence for me. I believe there's enough evidence to suspect document manipulation. The room suddenly felt colder. I stared at Miguel's wedding ring on my finger. 43 years together. He had spent his career protecting families from exactly this kind of deception. And now, his own wife had become its victim. Andrew gently closed the folders. Scarlett, I looked up. From this moment forward, his voice became firm. You must pretend you know absolutely nothing. I frowned. You want me to go home? Yes. And act normal. Exactly. What if Gabriel asks questions? You answer them exactly as you always have. Why? Andrew leaned forward. Because if someone has gone this far, he said quietly, they're almost certainly not finished yet. A chill ran down my spine. For the first time, I realized this wasn't simply about paperwork anymore. Someone was playing a much bigger game, and somehow, I was standing right in the middle of it. That evening, I returned home carrying nothing but my purse and a smile I had spent the entire drive practicing. Andrew's instructions echoed in my mind. Act exactly as you always have. I had never imagined that pretending to trust my own son would become the hardest performance of my life. As I pulled into the driveway, Gabriel was washing his pickup truck. He looked up and waved. Hey, Mom. I smiled back. Looks nice. It needed it. He walked over and kissed my cheek just as he always had. For a brief moment, I saw the little boy who used to splash muddy water everywhere while trying to help Miguel wash our old station wagon. The memory almost broke me. "How was the bookstore?" he asked. I had nearly forgotten the excuse I'd given before leaving 2 days earlier. "Oh," I said with a soft laugh. "I spent more time wandering than buying." "Find anything good?" "A gardening book." The lie tasted bitter. Gabriel smiled. "You and your flowers? I suppose some habits never change." He laughed. Neither of us mentioned lawyers, or county records, or missing documents. Dinner that evening felt strangely normal. Vanessa served grilled chicken with roasted vegetables. Sophia talked about an upcoming history project. Gabriel joked about one of his old construction clients who insisted on choosing paint colors by tossing darts at a color chart. Everyone laughed, even me. But I noticed something I had never paid attention to before. Every time I looked directly at Gabriel, he quickly looked away. It happened once, then twice, then again. A son who had nothing to hide shouldn't have struggled to meet his mother's eyes. Later that night, after everyone had gone upstairs, I sat alone in the living room. Miguel's old grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner. Tick, tick, tick. The sound had always comforted me. Now it felt like a countdown. I reached for the framed photograph resting on the side table beside me. It was the only picture of Miguel still downstairs, not hanging proudly on the wall where it had belonged, just sitting quietly beside my chair. "I'm trying," I whispered to his smiling face. "I just wish you were here." A floorboard creaked behind me. I quickly wiped my eyes. Sophia stood in the hallway wearing oversized pajamas and fuzzy socks. "I didn't mean to scare you." "You never do." She walked closer. "Couldn't sleep." "Not tonight." She sat beside me without saying anything. For nearly a full minute, we simply listened to the clock. Finally, she spoke. "Grandpa used to say silence isn't always empty." I smiled sadly. He did. He said sometimes it's where people tell the truth. I looked at her. There was something different in her expression. Not fear, determination. "Grandma." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped. "What is it, sweetheart?" She glanced toward the staircase. "They'll hear. We can go outside." She nodded. The backyard was cool beneath the evening sky. Crickets chirped among the flower beds Miguel had planted years ago. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself. "I've been trying to tell you." "I know, but Mom always comes." I noticed. She took a deep breath. "I heard them talking." "Who?" "My parents." "When?" "A few weeks ago." I stayed completely still. "They didn't know I was upstairs." "What did they say?" Sophia lowered her eyes. "They were in the kitchen." She swallowed hard. "Dad asked if everything was ready." My pulse quickened. "And—" Mom smiled. Sophia's voice trembled. She said— The words caught in her throat. "It's okay. You don't have to repeat them exactly." "No." She shook her head. "You need to know." She closed her eyes. She said, "Once Grandma leaves, everything becomes ours." The world seemed to stop, even though Andrew had warned me, even though I already suspected something terrible. Hearing those words spoken aloud hurt in a way I cannot fully describe, not because they wanted the house, but because they spoke about me as though I were only an obstacle standing between them and what they wanted. When she leaves, not when she's happy, not when she's safe. Simply, when she leaves, I force myself to remain calm. "What did your father say?" "He laughed." The answer pierced my heart. "What else?" "He said he couldn't wait much longer." Sophia began crying. I didn't understand what they meant. She covered her face. I thought maybe they were talking about moving somewhere else. I gently wrapped my arms around her. "You've done nothing wrong." "I should have told you sooner." "You were scared." She nodded. "Mom said if I repeated private conversations." Her voice cracked. I thought I'd destroy the family." I pulled her closer. "You didn't destroy anything." The family had already begun breaking long before she spoke. She simply refused to let it shatter completely. After a long silence, Sophia looked up at me. "I have something." "What do you mean?" She reached into the pocket of her hoodie. Her hand trembled as she pulled out an old smartphone. It wasn't the one she normally carried. "I found Grandpa's old phone charger." She smiled weakly. "So I charged this." I stared at the device. "My old phone?" She nodded. "I used it because Mom checks mine." A chill spread through my body. "What is on it?" I recorded them. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. "You recorded your parents. I didn't know what else to do." She unlocked the phone. There wasn't much. Her thumb hovered above the screen. But I thought if no one believed me, she pressed play. Static. Footsteps. Cabinet doors opening. Then Vanessa's voice. Calm, confident. "We're almost finished," Gabriel answered. "Are you sure she won't notice?" A quiet laugh. "By the time Scarlett figures anything out," a pause. "The house will already be ours." My hands began shaking uncontrollably. The recording continued. Gabriel sounded nervous. "What about the original documents?" "They're hidden. And if she asks, she trusts you." Another laugh. "She always will." The recording ended. The silence afterward felt unbearable. I wasn't crying. Not yet. Sometimes pain reaches a place beyond tears. I slowly handed the phone back to Sophia. "You've been carrying this by yourself for 3 weeks. You must have been terrified." "I was." She looked at me desperately. "Are you angry?" "At you." She nodded. I cupped her face gently. "My sweet girl." My voice finally broke. "You may have just saved me." She burst into tears. So did I. We held each other beneath the old oak tree Miguel had planted when Gabrielle was born. 3 generations connected by love and divided by betrayal. When we finally stood to go back inside, I remembered Andrew's warning. Pretend. Act normal. Tell no one. I looked at Sophia. "Can you keep this phone hidden?" She nodded. "No one knows I have it." "Good. What happens now?" I looked toward the warmly lit windows of the house. Inside were my son, my daughter-in-law, and the life I once believed was built on trust. "I don't know yet." That answer was honest, because although we now had proof, I couldn't shake the feeling that this recording was only one piece of a much larger plan. And somehow, the most dangerous part of that plan still hadn't happened. I barely slept that night. Sophia's recording replayed in my mind over and over again. By the time Scarlett figures anything out, the house will already be ours. Those words echoed through every quiet corner of my bedroom. I kept staring at the ceiling until dawn, wondering where I had failed as a mother. Had I loved Gabriel too much? Had I protected him from too many consequences when he was young? Or had greed simply found its way into his heart little by little until even he no longer recognized himself? By 7 o'clock, I was already dressed. I waited until Gabriel and Vanessa left the house. Gabriel kissed my forehead before walking out the door. "Don't work too hard in the garden today, Mom." "I won't," Vanessa smiled warmly. "We'll pick up dinner on the way home." "That sounds nice." They drove away as though nothing had changed, as though they hadn't spent months building a plan behind my back, as though they hadn't counted on my trust becoming their greatest advantage. The moment their SUV disappeared around the corner, I called Andrew. "I'm on my way." 25 minutes later, I sat across from him once again. This time I wasn't carrying only my fears. I placed the old phone on his desk. "I have something." He looked at the device. "What's this?" "My granddaughter recorded a conversation." His eyebrows lifted. May I?" I nodded. Andrew listened without interrupting. His expression remained calm until Vanessa said, "The house will already be ours." He paused the recording. "This is important. Can it be used?" "Possibly. But—" He leaned back in his chair. "Recordings like this help establish intent. They prove they planned something. Yes. But by themselves, they don't prove fraud." I felt disappointment settle over me. "So it isn't enough. It isn't enough to win." He smiled gently. "But it's more than enough to keep digging." That small sentence gave me hope. Andrew opened another folder. "I've continued reviewing the county filings." He slid several certified documents toward me. "I found something else." I looked down at the paperwork. There were several filing dates highlighted in yellow. "Do you notice anything unusual?" I shook my head. The documents were submitted over several weeks. So, that's uncommon. He pointed to another page. Most legitimate property transfers are recorded together. He tapped the paper again. These weren't. What does that mean? It suggests someone kept adding paperwork. Little by little. I thought about every document Gabriel had casually asked me to sign. Insurance, taxes, maintenance. Each request had seemed harmless, separate, routine. Together, they formed something much larger, Andrew continued. Someone was assembling a complete legal package over time, so I wouldn't notice. Exactly. I closed my eyes. Miguel always said that the most dangerous lies were the ones hidden inside ordinary truths. Now I finally understood what he meant. Andrew stood and walked toward a large filing cabinet. When he returned, he carried another thin folder. I also checked something Miguel left with the firm years ago. My heart skipped. Miguel. He maintained several confidential files here after retirement. I never knew. He was a careful man. That wasn't surprising. Miguel believed every important decision deserved preparation. Andrew opened the folder. Inside was a handwritten note, not a letter, just one page. He read quietly. If anything unusual ever happens regarding our home after my death, please make sure Scarlett speaks with an attorney before signing anything further. I stared at the handwriting. There was no mistaking it. Every curve, every line. Miguel. When did he write this? About 11 years ago? 11, Andrew nodded. It was sealed with several other personal instructions. I felt both comforted and confused. Why would he write something like that so many years ago? I don't know. He never mentioned it. He probably hoped you'd never need to read it. Tears blurred my vision. Even after all these years, Miguel was still trying to protect me. Andrew quietly placed the note back inside its folder. I've been thinking about something. What? Your husband specialized in property law. Yes. If he suspected there could someday be family disputes, he paused. It's possible he created additional legal protections. I frowned. What kind of protections? A trust. The word sounded strangely unfamiliar. A trust. A family trust. I've heard the term, but I don't really know what it means. Andrew walked over to a whiteboard. He drew 3 simple boxes. The first represents personal ownership. He pointed to the second. The second represents a trust, then the third. And the third represents beneficiaries. I listened carefully. If Miguel transferred ownership into a properly structured trust years ago, he underlined the second box, the house may never have been legally owned the way your son believes. I blinked. I'm saying there may be another layer to this story. Hope flickered inside me again. But wouldn't I know? Not necessarily. Why not? Miguel could have chosen not to burden you unless it became necessary. That sounded exactly like my husband. He never believed in worrying people about problems that might never happen. Can we find out? Andrew nodded slowly. I'm trying. You don't know yet. No. He looked genuinely frustrated. I've searched county records, and nothing. So there isn't one. Not necessarily. Then where would it be? He looked directly at me. If Miguel established a private trust, he said quietly, the managing trustee may still hold the original documents. A trustee, someone legally responsible for carrying out Miguel's instructions. I tried to remember every conversation I'd ever had with my husband, every business dinner, every old friend, every colleague. Nothing. I've never heard him mention anyone. Andrew folded his arms thoughtfully. Neither had I. The room fell silent. Finally, he asked a question that caught me completely off guard. Scarlett? Yes. Has anyone unusual contacted you recently? No. Letters. I shook my head. Phone calls? No. Visitors? Again, no. He nodded slowly. I believe someone is waiting. Waiting? For the right moment. I frowned. What moment? The moment your son believes he's won. Those words lingered between us. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about them. Waiting. Someone was waiting. For what? For whom? As I turned onto my street, I noticed Gabriel standing in the driveway talking on his cell phone. The moment he saw my car, he abruptly ended the call. He smiled. "You're home early." "So are you." "My afternoon meeting got canceled." His answer came too quickly. As we walked toward the front door together, I noticed him glance toward the mailbox, then toward the street, then back again, almost as if he was expecting someone, or perhaps he was afraid someone might arrive before he was ready. I looked down the quiet neighborhood road. There was nothing there, just sunlight dancing across the pavement, but deep inside, I could feel it. Whatever Miguel had prepared years ago, whatever secret Andrew believed, still existed. Whatever truth Gabriel was desperately trying to hide, all of it was moving toward us. Neither Gabriel nor I could see it yet, but I had the unmistakable feeling that somewhere, someone already knew exactly what was happening inside my home. And when that person finally arrived, everything would change. For the next 3 days, life settled into an uneasy routine. On the surface, everything appeared perfectly normal. Gabriel left for work every morning. Vanessa kept searching online for new real estate positions. Sophia attended summer classes and spent every spare moment helping me in the garden whenever her parents weren't around. If someone had visited our house, they would have seen an ordinary American family trying to rebuild after financial hardship. They would never have guessed that beneath the smiles, every conversation had become a carefully rehearsed performance. Andrew called me every evening with small updates. "So far," he would say, "keep doing exactly what you're doing." No confrontation, no accusations, no mention of the recording, no discussion about the missing property documents. Waiting had become part of the strategy. I hated it. Every time Gabriel smiled at me, I wondered whether he was thinking about the house instead of his mother. Every time Vanessa offered to refill my coffee, I questioned whether kindness had become nothing more than another tool. Only Sophia remained genuine. One afternoon, we sat together on the back porch watching a pair of bluebirds build a nest beneath the eaves. "They always come back," she said. "The birds." She nodded. "Grandpa used to say home isn't the place." I smiled sadly. "He said home is the people who protect each other." She looked at me. "I miss him." "So do I." "If Grandpa were here—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Everything would have been different. Miguel had always possessed an extraordinary ability to recognize dishonesty long before anyone else. He often joked that 40 years of practicing property law had taught him one universal truth. When someone rushes paperwork, he would say, "Slow down." I wished I had remembered those words sooner. Friday morning began with unexpected excitement inside the house. Vanessa came downstairs carrying 2 champagne glasses she had purchased the week before. She was humming to herself. Gabriel seemed unusually cheerful. "You look happy," I observed. He exchanged a quick glance with Vanessa. "We're making progress." Progress. "My construction company may finally have a major investor." "That's wonderful," he smiled. "We're not celebrating yet, but maybe soon." The explanation sounded reasonable. Still, something about both of them felt different. Not hopeful, victorious. Later that afternoon, Gabriel insisted on mowing the front lawn himself. Vanessa carefully arranged fresh flowers near the front entrance. She even polished the brass door handle until it gleamed in the sunlight. I watched quietly from the living room window. "This is a lot of work for a possible investor," I murmured. Sophia, who had been reading beside me, lowered her book. "They've been cleaning since yesterday." "You noticed?" She nodded. "They cleaned the dining room twice." That was unusual. Vanessa appreciated a clean house, but this felt almost ceremonial, as though they were preparing for someone important. Around 4 o'clock, Gabriel walked inside and checked his watch for what seemed like the 10th time. He looked out the front window, then at his phone, then back outside again, waiting, exactly as Andrew had predicted. A little after 5, Vanessa disappeared upstairs and returned wearing an elegant cream-colored dress I hadn't seen before. Gabriel changed into a navy blazer. I smiled politely. "You two certainly look nice." Vanessa laughed. First impressions matter. So the investor is coming here, Gabriel answered quickly. It's easier than meeting downtown. I nodded. No one invited me to join them. No one suggested I stay. In fact, Vanessa said something that immediately caught my attention. Scarlett, you've had such a busy week. I suppose. Why don't you spend the evening relaxing in your room? The suggestion was wrapped in kindness. But beneath it, I heard something else. Stay out of the way. I actually enjoy greeting guests, I replied pleasantly. Her smile stiffened. I'm sure you do. Gabriel stepped between us. It's just business. I understand. And I did. Just not in the way they imagined. At exactly 5:42 p.m., Andrew sent me a text message. Stay calm. If anything unusual happens tonight, observe everything. Don't act. Nothing more. No explanation. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The grandfather clock struck 6. Then 10 minutes passed. The entire house felt strangely quiet. Even Sophia seemed nervous. She stood beside me near the front window. Grandma. Yes. I don't like today. Neither did I. At 6:17 p.m., Gabriel's phone rang. He answered immediately. Yes. His face brightened. We're ready. He listened for several seconds before saying, perfect. He hung up and looked toward Vanessa. They're almost here. They, not he, not the investor. More than one person. Vanessa hurried into the dining room and adjusted the champagne bottle sitting in an ice bucket. She straightened the tablecloth, checked the glasses, smoothed her dress one final time. Gabriel walked to the front door and unlocked it before anyone had even arrived. His hands were trembling ever so slightly. I noticed because Miguel's hands had done the same thing whenever he was anxious before an important trial. A low engine sound drifted through the evening air. Sophia instinctively reached for my hand. Together we looked through the living room window. A sleek black sedan turned slowly onto our street. It wasn't flashy. No oversized chrome wheels. No tinted windows dark enough to hide everything inside. Just an elegant black luxury sedan moving with deliberate confidence. The moment Gabriel saw it all, the color drained from his face. His confident smile disappeared. Vanessa's fingers loosened around one of the champagne glasses. It slipped from her hand. The crystal shattered across the hardwood floor. Neither of them reacted. They were both staring at the same vehicle. No, Gabriel whispered. That's impossible. Vanessa grabbed his arm. You said they wouldn't know. His voice failed. I don't understand. The sedan rolled slowly into our driveway before coming to a smooth stop. Its engine fell silent. No one inside hurried to get out. The entire house seemed to stop breathing. Even the grandfather clock felt louder. Tick, tick, tick. Gabriel took one uncertain step backward. I had never seen fear on my son's face like that before. Not when Miguel died. Not when his business failed. Not even when creditors began calling every day. This was different. This was the fear of someone whose carefully constructed plan had suddenly begun to collapse. Sophia squeezed my hand tighter. Grandma. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My eyes remained fixed on the black sedan. The driver's door stayed closed. Then after what felt like an eternity, the rear passenger door slowly opened. A polished black dress shoe touched the driveway first. Then another. A distinguished gray-haired gentleman in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit stepped out, calmly closed the door behind him, and looked directly at our house. He carried a slim leather briefcase in one hand, in the other, a thick sealed manila envelope. Without saying a single word, he started walking toward the front porch. And somehow, before he even reached the front steps, I knew our lives were about to change forever. No one moved. The only sound inside the house was the faint ticking of Miguel's grandfather clock and the crunch of broken crystal beneath Vanessa's heel as she took an involuntary step backward. The gray-haired gentleman reached the front porch with measured confidence. He didn't look around, he didn't hesitate. He simply rang the doorbell once. A single polite chime echoed through the house. Gabriel remained frozen. Vanessa whispered urgently, "Don't answer it." He swallowed hard. "We have to." "No, we don't. If we don't—" He didn't finish the sentence. Whatever frightened him seemed even worse than opening the door. I quietly stepped forward. I'll get it. Gabriel reacted instantly. No. His voice was so sharp that everyone looked at him. He forced an awkward smile. I mean, I'll handle it, Mom. Without waiting for my response, he hurried to the entrance. He took one deep breath before opening the door. Can I help you? The gentleman offered a courteous smile. Good evening. His voice was calm, polished, and unmistakably professional. My name is Thomas Whitmore. The name meant nothing to me, but the effect it had on Gabriel was impossible to ignore. My son's shoulders stiffened. His face lost even more color. I think you have the wrong address. I don't believe I do. Thomas removed a business card from his jacket pocket. I'm looking for Mrs. Scarlett Gomez. I'll speak with her. I'm afraid I must speak with her personally. Gabriel shifted to block the doorway. My mother isn't feeling well. I appreciate your concern. Thomas's smile never faded. Nevertheless, my instructions require me to deliver these documents directly into Mrs. Gomez's hands. He raised the sealed manila envelope slightly. No substitute recipient is authorized. Gabriel glanced nervously toward Vanessa. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Don't let him in. I had seen enough. I walked toward the door. Gabriel. He turned quickly. Mom, please. It's all right. I stepped beside him and faced the visitor. I'm Scarlett Gomez. Thomas's expression softened immediately. Mrs. Gomez. He extended his hand. It is an honor to finally meet you. I shook it. You know me. I knew your husband. The word struck me like a sudden gust of wind. You knew Miguel. Yes. From where? We worked together on several legal matters over many years. I searched his face. Nothing looked familiar. I'm sorry. I don't remember meeting you. You wouldn't. He smiled gently. Your husband and I rarely met at your home. Gabriel interrupted. What exactly is this about? Thomas looked at him for the first time. I'm sorry. His tone remained courteous. But this matter concerns Mrs. Gomez. My mother lives here. I am aware. I'm her son. I'm also aware of that. Silence settled between them. Thomas never raised his voice. Yet somehow he completely controlled the conversation. He turned back to me. Mrs. Gomez, may I come inside? Before I could answer, Gabriel spoke again. Whatever this is, you can leave the paperwork. Thomas calmly shook his head. I'm afraid that isn't possible. Why not? Because the documents must first be explained. Vanessa finally stepped forward. We're in the middle of dinner. Thomas nodded politely. Then I'll be brief. Something in his confidence made it impossible to dismiss him. I opened the door wider. Please come in. Gabriel closed his eyes for a brief second, almost as though he already knew what was coming. Thomas entered slowly. His eyes moved around the living room. They paused on Miguel's photograph sitting on the side table instead of hanging above the fireplace. A flicker of sadness crossed his face. He would have preferred it on the wall. I stared at him. You knew him that well. Thomas smiled faintly. Better than most people realized. We all gathered in the living room. No one touched the champagne. No one mentioned the broken glass still scattered across the floor. Thomas remained standing. He placed the leather briefcase on the coffee table and carefully removed the thick envelope. The paper looked old, not worn, preserved, almost as though it had been waiting for years. Mrs. Gomez, he held it toward me. The seal is intact. I examined the front. Across the center, written in unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words. To my wife, Scarlett. Open only if necessary. My breath caught. Miguel wrote this. Yes. When? Thomas answered quietly. 9 years ago. 9 years. Long before his heart attack. Long before Gabriel lost his business. Long before any of us imagined our family would reach this point. My fingers trembled as I touched the envelope. I don't understand. You will. Thomas waited patiently while I broke the seal. Inside were several neatly folded documents. On top rested a handwritten letter. I immediately recognized Miguel's handwriting. My dearest Scarlett, if you are reading this, then something has happened that I prayed never would. My vision blurred before I reached the next sentence. Thomas spoke softly. Take your time. I continued reading. I have always believed that love should be stronger than money, but I have practiced law long enough to know that grief sometimes changes people in ways they never expect. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Every sentence sounded exactly like Miguel. Gentle, practical, protective. I looked up. Did he know this would happen? Thomas answered carefully. He believed it was possible. But how? He prepared for possibilities. That was true. Miguel never predicted disasters. He prepared for them. I looked back at the letter. If everything is well, this envelope should remain forever unopened. If it has reached your hands, trust Thomas completely. He has served our family faithfully for many years. I lowered the pages. Served our family. Thomas nodded. I accepted that responsibility a long time ago. Gabriel suddenly stood. This is ridiculous. Everyone turned toward him. My father never mentioned any of this. Thomas met his gaze calmly. He wasn't supposed to. My mother has already suffered enough. I agree. Then stop confusing her with old paperwork. Thomas slowly opened his briefcase again. This isn't old paperwork. He removed a blue leather folder. Its edges were perfectly preserved. Gold lettering gleamed across the front. I couldn't read the words from where I sat. Thomas looked directly at me. Mrs. Gomez. His expression became solemn. Before your husband passed away, he placed your home, several financial assets, and specific legal instructions into an irrevocable family trust. The room fell completely silent. I looked from Thomas to Gabriel, then back again. A trust, yes. Gabriel's face turned almost white. Vanessa gripped the arm of the sofa so tightly that her knuckles lost all color. Thomas rested one hand gently on the blue folder. And everything that has happened over the past several months, he paused, must now be evaluated according to the terms your husband established years before his death. No one spoke. The silence that filled the living room felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. I stared at the blue leather folder resting beneath Thomas Whitmore's hand. An irrevocable family trust. The words sounded familiar, yet distant as though they belonged to someone else's life. Finally, I found my voice. Miguel never told me. Thomas nodded with understanding. I know. Why would he keep something like this from me? He didn't keep it from you because he didn't trust you. His voice remained gentle. He kept it from you because he wanted you to live without carrying unnecessary burdens. I looked down at Miguel's letter. That sounded exactly like my husband. He had always protected me from problems whenever he could. If the roof leaked, he repaired it before mentioning it. If an investment performed poorly, he solved it before discussing it. He believed preparation was an act of love. Thomas carefully opened the blue folder. Inside were neatly organized documents separated by colored tabs. This trust, he explained, was established 9 years ago after Miguel represented a client whose children manipulated legal documents to seize family property. A painful chill ran through me. He came home deeply affected by that case. Thomas continued. He told me, I never want Scarlett to experience what that woman endured. Tears blurred my vision again. Even then. Years before his illness, Miguel had been thinking about protecting me. Gabriel suddenly folded his arms. With all due respect, this doesn't prove anything. Thomas looked at him calmly. You're correct. It doesn't. No. It proves several things. He slid the first document toward me. This is the trust agreement. My eyes immediately found Miguel's signature. Below it, mine. I frowned. I signed this. Yes. When? Thomas smiled faintly. On your wedding anniversary. I searched my memory. 9 years ago. You and Miguel came to my office after lunch. Pieces slowly returned. I remembered celebrating our anniversary. Miguel had insisted we stop by his office for one quick signature. He had told me it was part of updating our estate plan. I had signed several papers without reading every page because I trusted him completely. I laughed softly through my tears. He tricked me. Thomas chuckled. He preferred the phrase pleasant surprise. For the first time that evening, I smiled. Only Miguel could hide something so important behind an anniversary lunch. Thomas continued explaining. The trust became the legal owner of the house immediately after it was created. I frowned. So, I never actually owned the house by myself after that? Legally, you remain the lifetime beneficiary. He pointed to another section. You retain the unrestricted right to live here, to make decisions, to enjoy every benefit. But the trust itself became the title holder. I looked toward Gabriel. He stared at the documents without blinking. So any transfer, I whispered, would require the trust. Exactly. Thomas nodded. No individual, not even you, could legally transfer ownership outside the trust's terms. My heartbeat quickened. Then the paperwork Gabriel asked me to sign, Thomas answered carefully. If those documents attempted to transfer ownership directly, he paused, and they cannot override the trust. A wave of relief rushed through me. So the house wasn't stolen. Not successfully. I closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt as though I could breathe again. Then Thomas added quietly, "That doesn't mean no laws were broken." Gabriel abruptly stood. "This is absurd." His voice cracked with frustration. "You expect us to believe Dad secretly created some trust and never mentioned it?" Thomas calmly removed another document. "This is a certified copy of the recorded Memorandum of Trust." He handed it to Gabriel. "It has been on file for 9 years. Gabriel stared at the page. His hands began trembling. Vanessa leaned over to read it. Neither of them spoke. Thomas continued. "Miguel intentionally recorded only a memorandum." "Why?" I asked. "So the public would know a trust existed." He tapped the document. "Without revealing its private instructions." Meaning, the detailed provisions remained confidential. I slowly nodded. That sounded exactly like Miguel. Careful, precise. Always one step ahead. Thomas opened another section of the folder. "There is something else you should know." "What is it?" "The trust includes behavioral conditions." I blinked. "Behavioral conditions?" "Yes." Miguel believed inheritance should reflect character, not entitlement. Gabriel laughed bitterly. "Seriously?" Thomas ignored him. "He wrote specific standards for every potential beneficiary." I felt both curious and nervous. "What kind of standards?" Thomas read directly from the trust. "Every beneficiary shall demonstrate honesty, respect toward family members, and good faith conduct. Any intentional deception, coercion, forgery, financial manipulation, or abuse directed toward Scarlett Gomez shall immediately suspend all inheritance rights pending trustee review." The room fell silent again. Every word felt deliberate. Every sentence sounded unmistakably like Miguel. Gabriel shifted uncomfortably. "That's ridiculous." Thomas looked at him. "Your father disagreed." Vanessa finally spoke. "Those are just words." "Legally enforceable words," Thomas corrected gently. She looked away. I stared at Miguel's signature beneath the paragraph. Even after his death, he had still found a way to stand beside me. Thomas carefully closed one section of the folder before opening another. Miguel also left several sealed letters. For whom? For different situations. I looked at the stack. There are that many? Quite a few. He believed every major possibility deserved guidance. I smiled sadly. He always over-prepared. Thomas smiled. That quality made him an excellent attorney. He removed a smaller envelope. This one was not meant to be opened unless there were signs of family conflict. He turned it over but did not break the seal. "The instructions require me to wait." "Wait for what?" "For the investigation to conclude." I frowned. "So you still don't know everything?" "No. The trust requires evidence before certain provisions become active." Andrew's words suddenly echoed in my memory. "Someone is waiting until your son believes he's won." Now I understood. Miguel hadn't simply created legal documents. He had created a system designed to reveal truth before delivering consequences. Thomas looked directly at me. "Mrs. Gomez, yes, I need to ask you one important question." "Anything." "Did you willingly authorize your son to transfer ownership of this house to himself?" The answer came without hesitation. "Never." "Did you knowingly sign documents giving him ownership?" "No." "Did you intend to remove the house from the trust?" I didn't even know it was possible, Thomas nodded once. Thank you. He wrote several notes inside a leather notebook. Gabriel took a step forward. What exactly are you writing? Thomas closed the notebook. My observations. For who? For the trust file. Gabriel's jaw tightened. You've already decided I'm guilty. Thomas met his eyes steadily. No, I've decided nothing. My responsibility is not to assume. He placed the notebook back into his briefcase. My responsibility is to discover the truth. Then he looked around the room one final time, which is why he paused just long enough for every heartbeat in the room to become painfully loud. Beginning tomorrow morning, the trust will authorize a complete forensic review of every document, signature, financial transaction, and property filing connected to this house. Gabriel's face drained of color once again. Vanessa's breathing became noticeably uneven. Neither of them spoke, because for the first time since this nightmare had begun, they realized this was no longer a private family disagreement. It had become a formal legal investigation, and Miguel, even in death, had already planned for that possibility years before it ever became necessary. The house felt strangely empty after Thomas Whitmore left, not because fewer people were inside, because no one knew what to say. Gabriel disappeared into the garage without another word. Vanessa quietly carried the untouched champagne bottle back to the refrigerator. Sophia sat beside me on the sofa, gently holding my hand. Neither of us spoke. For the first time in weeks, silence no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to truth. The following morning, at precisely 9 o'clock, 2 vehicles pulled into the driveway. One belonged to Thomas. The other carried Andrew Collins and a middle-aged woman dressed in a charcoal business suit. Thomas introduced her. This is Rebecca Lawson. She shook my hand firmly. I'm a certified forensic document examiner. Gabriel stepped onto the porch. What's going on? Thomas answered calmly. As explained yesterday, we're beginning the trust's formal review. You can't just walk into our house. Thomas looked at him evenly. This property belongs to the Gomez Family Trust. He paused. Mrs. Gomez has authorized our access. I nodded. Yes. Gabriel looked at me in disbelief. Mom, I want the truth. For a long moment, he simply stared at me. Then he stepped aside. Rebecca began methodically examining every document Andrew had collected. She compared signatures, measured margins, photographed staples, even examined ink under a portable magnifier. Watching her work reminded me of Miguel preparing a complicated court case. Nothing escaped her attention. After nearly an hour, she placed several pages side by side. Interesting. Andrew leaned closer. What do you see? She pointed carefully. These pages were not originally part of the same document. Gabriel folded his arms. How can you possibly know that? Rebecca answered without emotion. The printer alignment differs. She pointed again. The paper stock isn't identical. Another page. The staple holes don't match. Then another. And this signature page was removed and reattached. She looked directly at Thomas. I have very high confidence these documents were assembled from multiple sources. The room became perfectly still. Andrew spoke quietly. In plain English, Rebecca closed the folder. Someone appears to have taken legitimate signed pages. She tapped the stack and combined them with different legal documents. Vanessa immediately shook her head. That's impossible. Rebecca remained calm. I didn't say who did it. I said that's what the physical evidence indicates. Gabriel's voice became defensive. Maybe the county made a mistake. Andrew answered this time. The county records exactly what it receives. He looked at Gabriel. It doesn't rewrite private paperwork. Thomas reached into his briefcase. There is one more matter. He removed a small digital recorder. Sophia. She looked up nervously. Would you be willing to tell us about the recording you shared with your grandmother? Gabriel immediately stepped forward. No. Everyone turned toward him. My daughter doesn't need to be dragged into this. Thomas remained composed. No one is forcing her. He looked gently at Sophia. The choice is yours. Sophia looked at me. I squeezed her hand. You only tell the truth. Nothing more. Nothing less. She nodded. I can do that. Thomas switched on the recorder. Please tell us in your own words how the recording was made. Sophia took a slow breath. I couldn't sleep. My parents were talking downstairs. I heard Dad ask if everything was ready. She swallowed. Mom said Grandma wouldn't figure it out until the house was already theirs. Gabriel interrupted. She misunderstood. Sophia turned toward him. I didn't. Her voice was soft, but steady. You also asked what would happen if Grandma found the documents. Gabriel opened his mouth. No words came out. Tears filled Sophia's eyes. I didn't want to record you. She looked at both of her parents. I wanted you to be wrong. The room fell silent again. Thomas gently turned off the recorder. Thank you. Rebecca quietly made another note. Andrew looked toward Gabriel. Would you like to explain the conversation? Gabriel rubbed both hands across his face. It sounds bad. Because it is bad, Vanessa whispered. He looked at her in shock. What? She stood abruptly. I can't keep pretending. The sentence landed like thunder. Gabriel stared at his wife. Vanessa. No, she shook her head. I'm exhausted. She turned toward me. Her eyes were red. I'm sorry. No one moved. She continued. I never wanted to hurt you. My heart sank. But she closed her eyes. After Gabriel's company failed. She looked down at the floor. Everything fell apart. Gabriel whispered, Don't. She ignored him. We owed more than anyone knew. Andrew asked quietly. How much? Vanessa answered without looking up. Almost $600,000. I gasped. Gabriel had told me his debts were less than a quarter of that. You lied, I whispered. He couldn't meet my eyes. Vanessa continued. We lost investors. The bank refused another extension. Creditors started calling every day. She wiped away tears. Gabriel became desperate. I was trying to save us, Gabriel said. By stealing from your mother, Andrew asked. I never wanted to steal. Gabriel's voice cracked. I thought... He stopped. What did you think? Thomas asked. I thought she'd eventually leave the house to me anyway. I stared at my son. So you decided not to wait. He lowered his head. I convinced myself it wasn't really wrong. The admission hurt more than I expected, not because of the house, because I recognized the moment he had crossed the line inside his own conscience. Andrew spoke carefully. Did you ask anyone to alter these documents? Gabriel hesitated. Vanessa answered first. There was a document preparation service. Andrew immediately looked up. What service? She named a small private company. We told them we needed corrected copies. Did they know pages were being replaced? I don't know. Rebecca quietly added, they'll have records. Thomas closed the blue trust folder. That information will be important. Then he looked directly at Gabriel. I have one final question. Gabriel nodded weakly. When your mother signed those papers, Thomas asked, did she understand she was transferring ownership of her home? A long silence followed, long enough for everyone in the room to know the answer before Gabriel finally spoke. No. The word barely escaped his lips. Thomas nodded once. Thank you. He opened the trust file and carefully wrote several lines. When he finished, he closed the folder with deliberate care. The preliminary investigation is complete. I looked at him. What happens now? Thomas met my eyes. Based on today's evidence, he said quietly, I will immediately notify law enforcement and recommend that the district attorney review this matter for potential criminal charges involving document fraud, attempted property theft, and financial deception. Gabriel slowly sank into a chair. Vanessa covered her face and began sobbing. Sophia leaned against my shoulder. As for me, I felt no satisfaction, only heartbreak, because the man who now faced a criminal investigation was still the little boy whose hand I had once held while teaching him to cross the street. The police did not arrive with flashing lights. There were no sirens, no neighbors gathering on sidewalks, no dramatic handcuffs in the middle of the living room. Instead, 2 detectives came quietly the following afternoon. They wore plain clothes and carried folders. That somehow made everything feel more serious, more real. Detective Harris, a calm woman with silver-framed glasses, asked to speak with each of us separately. Thomas and Andrew remained present as legal representatives for the trust and for me. Gabriel sat at the dining table with both hands clasped together. He looked exhausted. His face had aged overnight. When Detective Harris asked whether he wanted an attorney before answering questions, he stared at the floor for several seconds. Then he nodded. "I think I should." That was when I knew the situation had moved beyond family explanations, beyond apologies, beyond anything I could fix by forgiving too quickly. Vanessa agreed to speak. For nearly 2 hours, she answered questions in the study while Gabriel waited in the garage. Sophia stayed upstairs with me. She sat on the edge of my bed, hugging one of Miguel's old pillows to her chest. "Are they going to arrest Dad?" "I don't know." "Do you want them to?" The question broke my heart. I sat beside her. "I want the truth to be handled properly." "That's not an answer." "No." I took her hand. "It isn't." She looked down. "I still love him." "So do I." Her eyes filled with tears. "How can we love someone who did something terrible?" I thought carefully before answering. "Love doesn't always disappear when trust is broken. Sometimes it simply changes." "Then what are we supposed to do?" "We tell the truth. We protect what is right. And we let the person who caused the harm decide whether they are willing to change." Sophia nodded slowly. I wasn't sure she fully understood. I wasn't sure I did either. Later that evening, Vanessa came upstairs carrying 2 suitcases. Her eyes were swollen. Her cream dress from the night before had been replaced by jeans and a gray sweater. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, spiritually. "Scarlett," I stood from the bed. "Are you leaving?" She nodded. I called my sister and Charlotte. "How long?" "I don't know." Sophia immediately rose. "Mom," Vanessa looked at her daughter and began crying again. "I'm sorry." "For what part?" Sophia's voice was sharper than I had ever heard it. "For lying, for using Grandma, for making me keep secrets?" Vanessa flinched. "All of it. You said I would destroy the family. I was wrong. You scared me." "I know." "No." Sophia stepped closer. "You don't know. You had Dad. You had each other. I had no one." Vanessa covered her mouth. The pain on her face was real, but so was Sophia's anger. I wanted to step between them, to soften the moment, but some truths should not be interrupted. Vanessa lowered her hand. "I became someone I don't recognize." Sophia stared at her. "Then why didn't you stop?" "Because every lie made the next lie easier." The room fell silent. Vanessa looked at me. At first I told myself we were only borrowing against the house. Then I told myself Gabriel would repay everything. Then I told myself you would never need to know. She wiped her cheeks. Eventually, I stopped asking whether it was wrong. I only asked whether we could get away with it. Her honesty arrived too late to prevent the damage, but not too late to matter. "Will you cooperate with the investigation?" I asked. "Yes." "Completely?" "Yes." "Even if it hurts Gabriel?" She closed her eyes. "It already has." Sophia crossed her arms. "Am I going with you?" Vanessa looked at me before answering. "I think you should stay here." Sophia blinked. "You don't want me?" "No." Vanessa moved toward her. "That isn't what I mean." She stopped when Sophia stepped back. "You need stability. You need school. You need your grandmother," her voice broke. "And right now, I don't trust myself to give you what you need." Sophia's anger softened slightly, not into forgiveness, only sadness. Vanessa placed one suitcase beside the door. "I'll call you every day." Sophia didn't answer. "I'll come back when—" Vanessa hesitated. "When I figured out how to be better." Sophia looked away. "People always say that after they get caught." Vanessa began crying harder. I finally stepped forward. "Give her time." She nodded. Then very slowly she approached me. "I don't expect you to forgive me." "Good." She looked surprised by my answer. I continued, "Because forgiveness isn't something you should demand from the person you harmed." She lowered her head. "But I hope one day—" "So do I." I meant it. Not because she deserved immediate mercy, but because Sophia deserved a mother capable of becoming honest again. Vanessa left shortly before sunset. From the bedroom window, Sophia and I watched her place the suitcases into the trunk of her car. She stood beside the driver's door for several seconds, looking back at the house. Then she got inside and drove away. Sophia did not wave, neither did I. Gabriel remained under investigation. His attorney advised him not to discuss the case with me. For the next week, he moved through the house like a ghost. He slept in the guest room, ate alone, spent hours making phone calls behind closed doors. Detectives collected his laptop business records and several boxes from the garage. The document preparation company turned over emails. Those emails showed that Gabriel had asked for replacement signature pages and reorganized filing packets. He had never written the word forgery, but the intention was becoming harder to deny. Thomas temporarily suspended Gabriel's beneficiary status under the trust. The attempted transfer was formally challenged. The county placed an immediate hold on all property filings connected to the house. My home was legally protected. Yet victory did not feel like victory. One evening, I found Gabriel standing beneath the old oak tree, the same tree Miguel had planted when he was born. He stared up at its branches. "Dad would hate me," he said. I stopped several feet away. "He would hate what you did." Gabriel looked at me. "Is there a difference?" "Yes." My voice trembled. "But right now, that difference depends on what you do next." He lowered his eyes. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix everything." "Then what's left?" "The truth, consequences, and whatever kind of man you choose to become after both." He nodded slowly. For the first time, he did not ask me to rescue him. Inside the house, Sophia was waiting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of tea, one for her, one for me. She had decided to stay, not because the house belonged to a trust, not because Vanessa had left, but because, in her words, this was the only place where she still felt safe. That night, we rehung my wedding photograph above the fireplace. Sophia held the frame steady while I tightened the hook. When we stepped back, Miguel smiled down at us once more. The house still carried betrayal inside its walls, but for the first time in months, it also felt like home again. The weeks that followed moved more slowly than I thought possible. People often imagine that after the truth comes out, life immediately becomes easier. It doesn't. Truth doesn't erase pain. It simply removes the lies that were hiding it. Autumn arrived quietly. The maple tree Miguel had planted near the driveway turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Every morning, Sophia and I gathered fallen leaves before breakfast. She had settled into a new routine: school, homework, helping me prepare dinner, long conversations on the back porch after sunset. Little by little, laughter returned to the house. Not the loud, carefree laughter we once shared. Something gentler, something earned. Gabriel, however, seemed trapped between 2 worlds. His attorney had negotiated with the district attorney's office after Gabriel agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation. The document preparation company admitted that employees had accepted incomplete packets without properly verifying how the signature pages had been assembled. Several workers were disciplined. One manager resigned. But Andrew explained something important. Mistakes by others don't erase Gabriel's responsibility. I understand. He initiated the process. I know. He also concealed material information from you. Those words hurt every time I heard them. Concealed, manipulated, deceived. They belonged in courtrooms, not inside families. One Saturday afternoon, Thomas called. "May I stop by?" Of course. He arrived carrying only a slim leather folder, no thick trust documents, no investigators, no legal assistance, just himself. We sat on the back porch while Sophia baked cookies inside. "I have an update," I nodded. "The district attorney is considering alternatives." "What kind of alternatives?" "Because Gabriel has admitted substantial wrongdoing, returned every document, and fully cooperated." Thomas paused. "They may resolve part of the criminal matter through restitution and supervised probation rather than lengthy incarceration." I stared into my tea. "I don't know how I feel." "You don't have to decide today." "I still love him." "I know, but I'm still angry." Thomas smiled gently. "Those feelings can exist together." I looked toward the old oak tree. "When Miguel died, I thought losing him would be the hardest thing I'd ever survive. And now I know watching someone you raised become someone you barely recognize hurts in a completely different way. Thomas didn't interrupt. He simply listened, much like Miguel always had. Before leaving, he handed me the folder. What's this? A request. Inside was a handwritten letter, not from Miguel, from Gabriel. I advised him not to deliver it unless you wanted to read it. When did he write this? 3 days ago. I held the unopened envelope for several minutes before finally breaking the seal. The handwriting was shaky. Dear Mom, I don't know whether I deserve to call you that after everything I've done. I've rewritten this letter more times than I can count because every apology sounds too small. There isn't a sentence in the English language big enough to repair what I broke. I stopped reading. Tears filled my eyes, not because he apologized, because I could hear my son's voice again, not the defensive man from recent months, the frightened little boy who used to cry whenever he disappointed me. I continued. I spent so much time blaming my business partners, the economy, bad luck, and impossible debts that I stopped blaming the only person truly responsible, me. No one forced me to lie. No one forced me to hide documents. No one forced me to choose money over honesty. I did that, one decision at a time. The words blurred through my tears. When Dad died, I convinced myself I had to become him. Strong, successful, able to fix everything. When I failed, I became ashamed. Instead of asking for help, I began looking for shortcuts. Every shortcut led me further away from the man Dad raised me to be. By the time I realized how far I'd gone, I had already hurt the person who loved me most. I folded the letter against my chest. Thomas quietly stood. I'll leave you alone. Thank you. After he left, I sat on the porch until sunset reading the letter again. And again. It never once asked for forgiveness. Only accountability. That mattered. 2 days later, Gabriel knocked on my bedroom door. He hadn't done that since he was a teenager. Mom? Come in. He stood awkwardly in the doorway. His eyes looked tired. The confident businessman who once believed he controlled every situation was gone. In his place stood a man carrying the full weight of his own choices. I was told you read my letter. I did. I'm not here to change your mind. I know. I'm here because there are things I need to say out loud. I gestured toward the chair beside my window. He remained standing. I don't deserve to sit. Gabriel. He slowly lowered himself into the chair. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. I kept telling myself I'd make everything right after we got the house. I looked at him. I believed I'd repay debts. Fix the paperwork. Take care of you. He laughed bitterly. I actually convinced myself I was protecting you. You weren't protecting me. I know. You were protecting yourself. He nodded. I know. His honesty made the conversation harder, not easier. I visited Dad's grave yesterday. I remained silent. I apologized. What did you say? I told him I spent my whole life trying to earn his respect. He swallowed hard. And destroyed it because I couldn't admit I'd failed. I walked to the window. Outside, Sophia was raking leaves beneath the oak tree. She looked up and waved. I waved back. Without turning around, I asked, "What do you want from me?" "I don't know." He answered honestly. "I don't think I have the right to ask for anything." "Then why are you here?" "Because I need you to hear one sentence." I faced him again. He stood slowly. "I'm sorry, Mom." Not the hurried apology people give to end an argument. Not the careful apology written by lawyers. A broken one. A human one. I betrayed the only person who never stopped believing in me. His voice cracked. And if you never forgive me... He wiped away tears. "I'll understand." I walked toward him. For one brief second, I almost hugged him. Almost. Instead, I gently placed my hand against his cheek. "You are still my son." Hope flickered in his eyes. "But..." I continued before he could speak. "Being my son does not erase what you did." His shoulders lowered. "I know. Trust isn't rebuilt because someone says they're sorry." "I know. It's rebuilt by how they live after the apology." He nodded. "I'll spend however long it takes." I believed he meant it. Whether he would succeed, Only time could answer that. As he quietly left my room, I looked once more at Miguel's photograph. For the first time since this nightmare began, I thought I saw not only the father Gabriel had disappointed, but the father who would still hope his son could become an honest man again. And somehow, that hope gave me the strength to take the next step forward. Winter arrived gently that year. The first frost covered Miguel's rose bushes with delicate crystals that sparkled beneath the morning sun. For the first time in months, I stood on the front porch without feeling anxious every time a car slowed near the driveway. The investigation was no longer consuming every hour of my life. It had become part of the past, not forgotten, simply placed where it belonged. Andrew called one afternoon with the final legal update. The county has officially voided every fraudulent filing. I closed my eyes in relief. So it's over. The title has been fully confirmed in the Gomez Family Trust. No further claims, none. He smiled through the phone. Legally speaking, your home never left the trust, I laughed softly. Miguel really thought of everything. He usually did. There was one more pause before Andrew continued. Thomas would like to meet with you tomorrow. What about the future? The next afternoon, Thomas arrived carrying the familiar blue trust folder. This time, however, there was no tension. No investigators, no detectives. Only coffee, homemade pie, and quiet conversation around the dining room table. Sophia joined us after school. She had grown remarkably mature over the previous months. Pain often forces children to become older than they should. Thomas looked around the house with a peaceful smile. It feels different. It does. I glanced toward the fireplace. Miguel's wedding photograph had returned to its rightful place. The old leather recliner was back beside the window. His record player once again rested on the bookshelf he had built decades earlier. Even the living room somehow seemed warmer. Thomas opened the trust folder. Miguel left one additional instruction regarding this property. I looked up. Another one? He believed homes should continue serving people, I smiled. That sounds like him. Thomas unfolded a handwritten page. This instruction becomes active only after the trust has successfully protected the property. He began reading. If Scarlett chooses to remain in our home, she shall always have that right. However, if she ever wishes to share this place with others who need hope, the trustee is authorized to help make that possible. I frowned. What does he mean? Thomas looked at me. You decide. No conditions. None. Only possibilities. That sentence stayed with me long after he left. Possibilities. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about it. One afternoon, Linda Brooks stopped by carrying a casserole for dinner. As we sat together in the kitchen, she mentioned something that caught my attention. The senior center had to cancel 2 grief support groups. Why? They lost access to their meeting room. I looked toward the living room, our living room, large enough for 20 people. Warm, comfortable, filled with memories of healing. An idea quietly took root. Over the next several days, I visited local churches, veterans organizations, and the community center. Again and again, I heard similar stories. Widows eating dinner alone, retired veterans struggling with loneliness, grandparents raising grandchildren without support, families recovering from betrayal addiction or loss. There were people everywhere carrying invisible burdens, the same kind I'd carried after Miguel died, the same kind I had carried after Gabriel betrayed me. One evening, I gathered everyone still living in the house. Sophia, Gabriel, Thomas, Andrew, even Linda. I've made a decision. Everyone looked at me. I want this house to become more than my home. Thomas smiled quietly. I thought you might. I want one evening every week dedicated to anyone in our community who needs a place to belong. Sophia's face brightened. Like Grandpa used to do at Christmas. I smiled. Exactly. Miguel had always believed no one should spend holidays alone. Every Christmas Eve, he invited neighbors, widowers, military veterans, and anyone who needed company. I hadn't realized how much I missed those evenings until that moment. Andrew nodded approvingly. I think he'd be proud. Within a month, our first gathering filled the living room. A retired school teacher whose children lived across the country. A young military wife adjusting to civilian life after her husband's deployment. An elderly widower who admitted he hadn't shared dinner with another person in nearly 6 months. A grandmother raising twin grandsons. Nobody came because they wanted charity. They came because they wanted connection. We shared homemade soup, fresh bread, stories, sometimes tears, sometimes laughter, always honesty. Slowly the house transformed. The walls that had witnessed deception now echoed with encouragement. The dining table where forged paperwork had once been signed became a place where strangers became friends. Miguel's favorite piano, silent for years, played again after a retired music teacher volunteered to entertain everyone. Even the old grandfather clock seemed happier somehow. Its steady ticking no longer sounded like a countdown. It sounded like life continuing. Gabriel rarely joined the gatherings at first. He believed people would judge him. Perhaps some did, but no one said anything. Instead, they simply greeted him politely. One snowy evening, I found him standing in the kitchen washing dishes after everyone had gone home. "You don't have to do all of these." "I know." He kept scrubbing quietly. "I want to." "You've been doing this every week." I noticed. He smiled faintly. I figured actions probably matter more than speeches. I looked at him for a long moment. "They do. I can't erase what happened." "No. But maybe—" He dried another plate. "I can help build something better." Those words reminded me so much of Miguel that tears filled my eyes. Not because Gabriel had become his father, he never could, but because he had finally stopped looking for shortcuts. Healing, I realized, isn't dramatic. It's ordinary. One honest decision, followed by another and another. That spring, a small wooden sign appeared near our front walkway. Sophia painted it herself. In careful blue letters, it read, "The Gomez House. A place where no one eats alone." Every Thursday evening, the porch lights glowed warmly. Neighbors arrived carrying pies, casseroles, and stories. Children laughed in the backyard. Veterans swapped memories over coffee. Widows found friends who understood silent grief. The house Miguel built with his own hands had become exactly what he always dreamed it could be. Not simply a beautiful home, but a refuge. A place where broken hearts could begin finding their way back together. And every time I opened the front door to welcome another stranger inside, I felt as though Miguel was quietly welcoming them with me. A full year passed before I realized something remarkable. I no longer measured time by the day everything fell apart. I measured it by the people who had found hope inside this house. Every Thursday evening, our front porch filled with familiar faces. Mr. Daniels, the retired history teacher, always arrived 15 minutes early to help arrange chairs. Mrs. Flores brought homemade cornbread so consistently that everyone joked the gathering couldn't begin until she walked through the front door. The young military family welcomed their first baby. The elderly widower who had once confessed he spent months eating dinner alone now laughed louder than anyone else in the room. Little by little, this house stopped being known as the place where betrayal happened. It became known as the place where healing began. One crisp October afternoon, Thomas Whitmore called. "There is one final matter I'd like to complete." I thought everything had already been settled. Legally, yes, but this is personal. He arrived carrying the familiar blue trust folder, though it looked thinner than before. Sophia opened the door. "Mr. Whitmore." He smiled warmly. "I believe you've grown 3 inches since I saw you last." She laughed. "I keep telling Grandma that." Thomas stepped inside and looked around the living room. Miguel's photograph still hung proudly above the fireplace. Fresh flowers rested beneath it. The old leather recliner sat beside the window exactly where Miguel had always liked it. "I think he'd approve," Thomas said quietly. "So do I." We sat together while Sophia prepared tea. Gabriel arrived home shortly afterward. He hesitated when he saw Thomas. "I didn't know we had company." Thomas stood and offered his hand. "Good afternoon, Gabriel." Gabriel accepted it, not confidently, respectfully. Good afternoon. There had been many changes over the previous year. Gabriel had completed every requirement ordered by the court. He had cooperated fully with investigators. He had repaid every legal expense he was required to cover. Most importantly, he had rebuilt his life honestly. He found steady work managing construction projects for another company instead of trying to rescue his failed business through risky decisions. He volunteered at our Thursday gatherings without being asked. He never spoke about earning forgiveness. He simply showed up, again and again and again. Thomas opened the trust folder. There was one final sealed letter. I immediately recognized Miguel's handwriting. My heart tightened. Another one, Thomas nodded. This letter was not to be opened until the family reached a place of stability. He handed it to me. According to the trust, today is that day. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten page. My dearest Scarlett, if this letter has finally been opened, then I hope two things are true. First, I hope you are safe. Second, I hope anger has not become the permanent guest inside your heart. I paused to steady myself before continuing. If someone betrayed your trust, remember this. Protect yourself without becoming bitter. Seek justice without surrendering kindness. Hold people accountable without forgetting they are still human beings. Those 3 sentences captured everything Miguel believed. I looked toward Gabriel. His eyes never left the floor. I continued reading. If Gabriel has lost his way, do not excuse him, but do not stop believing he can find it again. Character is not revealed by success. Character is revealed by what someone does after failing. My voice trembled. Sophia quietly moved beside me and rested her hand on my shoulder. The final paragraph was shorter. Scarlett. The greatest thing we ever built was never this house. It was the family we kept choosing day after day. If that family breaks, remember that homes can be repaired the same way old wooden beams are repaired. Remove what is rotten, strengthen what remains, build carefully, and never stop opening the front door to people who need love. Forever yours. Miguel's silence filled the room. No one hurried to speak. Finally, Gabriel stood. He walked toward Miguel's photograph. I spent a long time thinking Dad wanted perfection. He swallowed hard. I was wrong. He turned toward me. He wanted honesty. I nodded. Yes. Gabriel took a slow breath. I know I'll spend the rest of my life wishing I could undo what I did. You can't. I know. But I hope one day... He stopped. I hope one day when Sophia tells her children about our family, his voice broke. She'll be able to tell them I became a better man than the one who betrayed you. Sophia walked across the room and hugged her father. It wasn't the hug of a little girl pretending nothing had happened. It was the hug of someone who had watched another human being choose responsibility every single day. I already see that happening, she whispered. Gabriel cried openly. So did I. There were no dramatic speeches, no miraculous ending where every wound disappeared. Real healing doesn't work that way. Some scars remain, not to remind us of our failures, but to remind us how much strength it took to survive them. That evening happened to be Thursday. As the sun began to set, neighbors started arriving for our weekly dinner. Someone carried soup. Someone else brought apple pie. Children ran across the yard chasing autumn leaves. Laughter drifted through the open windows. Before opening the front door, I paused beside the driveway. The place where more than a year earlier a sleek black sedan had changed everything. Back then, I believed that car had arrived to destroy my family. Now I understood the truth. It hadn't come to destroy us. It had come to stop a lie from becoming permanent. It had carried justice. It had carried my husband's final promise. And because of that promise, the house we built together still stood, not as a monument to betrayal, but as living proof that truth, though sometimes painfully delayed, has a way of finding its rightful home. I smiled, opened the front door, and welcomed another family inside, just as Miguel always hoped I would. Life has taught me that betrayal hurts most when it comes from the people we love the most. We naturally expect strangers to disappoint us from time to time, but we believe our families will protect us. When that trust is broken, it can feel as though the foundation beneath our feet has disappeared. Yet this story also reminds us that justice and forgiveness are not the same thing. Justice means allowing the truth to come into the light, and accepting the consequences of our choices. Forgiveness, when it comes, is a personal journey that cannot be rushed or demanded. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is hold someone accountable while still believing they are capable of becoming better. Scarlett did not win because she kept her house. She won because she refused to let betrayal turn her into a bitter person. Instead of allowing her home to become a place defined by pain, she transformed it into a place where others could find comfort, friendship, and hope. In doing so, she honored Miguel's memory far more than any legal victory ever could. If there's one lesson worth carrying forward, it's this: protect what is right. Cherish the people who earn your trust and never underestimate the quiet strength of integrity. Money, property, and success may come and go, but a life built on honesty will always leave a legacy that lasts far longer than anything money can buy. If Scarlett's journey touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a painful betrayal? We'd love to hear your story. And if you enjoy emotional family dramas filled with suspense, powerful twists, and meaningful endings, don't forget to subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next unforgettable story.